let's talk now about the different types of addresses that we have in regards to a VNet. Now, if we go and take a look at portal.azure.com, go to our resource groups, and then we're going to go down to the VNet demo RG, which is where my VNets are. I've got my 4 VNets. Now, the private addressing system with VNets are set up at the creation of the VNet. You select, when you create the VNet, you have to specify the actual address space that you're using, and then you obviously create subnets that go with that. And that's just part of the Azure environment. Those are private addresses. You can use the 10 dot scenario, the 172.16 scenario, the 192.168 for internal addressing. But if you plan to allow for a public address to be used, perhaps maybe you're going to allow a virtual machine to have a public IP address directly that's sitting on one of your VNets, or perhaps you're going to assign a public address to something like a Azure firewall, or you're going to allow public address to be assigned to a load balancer or a VPN gateway or something like that, then you can actually add a public IP address resource inside the resource group, which can then be assigned to a resource, whether it be a virtual machine or a load balancer or VPN gateway, or whatever it may be. Let's go through that process now of adding a public address to our resource group here, right? So if we go here to our resource group, we'll just click create, and we will search for public IP and just hit enter. All right, and there it is right there, public IP address. So we'll click create public IP. All right, and then from there we can choose what kind of public address we want, IPv4, v6, or both. Now again, for the most part, most everything these days in Azure is still using IPv4. There are certain circumstances where you can use v6, but natively Azure doesn't really use v6 a whole lot for things. It actually has to use translation to convert from v6 to v4. So most everybody still kind of uses v4 for things. Then you have the SKU. This is a stock keeping unit, which gets into like the pricing, and there's a standard and basic. And if you click this and you go to learn more, oddly enough, the learn more link actually takes you to an article about load balancing and not an article about the actual SKU for this. So I've found that what I have to do is go here and do a search, Azure public IP SKU, and if I do a search for that, I can find an article right here, public IP addresses in Azure, and click on that, and that will break down, this nice little table for you will break down the difference. So you can see kind of the difference here. With a standard, you can actually use a static address. With basic, you do dynamic. Basic is going to be cheaper if you go to the Azure calculator and look at it. All right, so you can kind of look too, with standard, I get availability zones, I get more routing preferences, I can do what's called global tiers for having addresses that are across the global internet, closer to where my resources might be or my clients are, whereas basic doesn't give you all that. Of course, basic is a cheaper solution. All right, so I could do standard or I could do basic. For me, I'm going to do basic just because it's going to be the cheaper way to go in my little limited amount of storage that I've got, or limited credit, I should say, with in Azure. And of course, basic doesn't let you choose global; it goes with regional, so it just assigns you an address based on a regional scenario, based on the closest. Where if you're using East US, you're going to get an address near that, right? Whereas global, you have a little bit more control. So here, I'd specify the name. I'm just going to call this. I'm going to call it pip demo IP. All right, and then if I want to do a dynamic address, that means it'll assign an address dynamically, and the address will get assigned when it's assigned to a resource, and then when that resource goes offline, you may get a different address. The other thing that happens though is that it does assign a DNS label. So as long as you don't have things mapping to that IP address directly and you go by the DNS label, it really doesn't matter if it's dynamic, but I'm going to go with static. And then you have idle timeout. So that is establishing a session. When something establishes a session with that address, it will keep that session alive by default for 4 minutes. Okay, and then if that other device that's communicating with the IP address isn't responding within 4 minutes, it will terminate the session. and if it gets reestablished, it'll do it another 4 minutes. It'll only terminate the session, though, if the other side stops talking to this address. It's pretty common that's the way that things work in TCP/IP anyway. Okay, and then you could specify a DNS label you want to give it here. I'll call it Exam Lab Practice PIP. All right, and that'll be the name that I give it. And so Exam Lab Practice pip.eastus.cloudapp.azure.com. So whatever I assign this address to, it's going to get that DNS name. Now keep in mind, you can also add your own specialized DNS custom domain names later if you want. Okay, so then you would select your subscription, and then the resource group that this is going to be in, and the location. All right. So at that point, I'm now officially ready to click Create. I'm going to go ahead and create this address. So it's going to go ahead and process through. All right, and we'll let that get created. Once that's done, we should now be able to go and find it. So if we go to our resource groups here, and we go to VNet Demo RG, here it is right here. It shows up pip demo IP. We can go ahead and click on that, and you can see the address that I was assigned. And again, at that point, I could also, if I was creating a virtual machine or something like that, or creating a resource that needs a public IP address, I've already got a public IP address available. It's going to use this DNS name. All right. So that is how we can assign a public IP address to our resource group. And then, of course, again, as we start creating resources, we could then associate that public IP address with that resource. Hey, this is John Christopher. I hope you enjoyed that video, and I want you to know that I'm trying really hard to grow this channel, so I hope you'll give me a like and a subscribe. Also, if you'll check the description in this video, I've got a link for you that can show you how you can get access to all my different courses. I have lots of different Microsoft certification courses that'll help you pass your exam. All right, thanks a lot for watching the video, and I hope to see you again.